Hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to show how to use the timer uh, element in Simio. I'll make a simple model to demonstrate some of the main uh, usefulness of timers and how you can utilize them in your own systems. Let me give you some of the background information here. This model we're going to create to demonstrate some of the points here. Okay, so I'm going to create a fictitious bank model. Okay, so let's say we have a fictitious bank called Co-op Bank. Okay, and again, this is completely fictitious. We'll kind of simulate this process where a withdrawal happens every 45 minutes, and then a deposit happens every 60 minutes. So every 45 minutes, some money in reserve is removed from the bank, and then every 60 minutes, somebody makes a deposit. Okay, so we want to simulate this process using a timer so that, for example, every 45 minutes, a withdrawal occurs, and every 60 minutes, a deposit occurs. And the third process I also want to simulate is every 3 hours, we're going to assume there's some kind of a balance reset. So every 3 hours, let's say the bank had $1 million, then it can go up. The balance can go up and down depending on the activity. But every 3 hours, the balance will reset to $1 million. Okay, so we'll just kind of make some values here, but this is what we want to simulate. Okay, and I'm going to utilize timers to make this happen. Okay, so we're going to go on Simio and then make this model quickly, and then set up a logic using timers. Let's go to Simio. I can create this model, not really using too many objects, but just so that we can visualize what's going on. I'm going to put in some sources here in the server, but honestly, you don't need to add these things, but I'm going to do it just for, so you can visualize what's going on. So I'm going to create two sources, okay, and I'll put a server down, okay, and then I'll put a sink. Okay, so the idea here is source one would represent the withdrawal. Okay, so I'll just call this, I don't know, call it debit, and then I'll call this one credit. Okay, you don't even have to change the name if you don't want to. Okay, and like I said, in order for me to use timers, I should simulate what I described earlier. You don't need these objects. I'm gonna just do it because it's just always good to see this visually what's going on. And I'm going to put down two model entities. The first one, this will be this will be the withdrawal. And then the second one entity will be the deposit. Let me change the color of the withdrawal. I'll change the withdrawal to red. Okay. And I'm going to connect these objects using a path. So I'm going to connect debit with server, the output of credit to server one, and then it'll just go straight to sync when this is done. Okay, so again, the idea here is every 60 minutes, we're going to have a deposit event, and every 45 minutes, we're going to have a withdrawal event happening. And the server is basically our bank. Okay, I just call it, I don't know, cash balance. Or you know what? I'll just call it the bank, and then I'm going to create a state variable that represents the cash balance. Okay, so let's do that first. I need some kind of variable that keeps track of the actual cash balance in the bank, right? So I'm going to go to definitions, go into states, create a real estate variable. I'll call this cash reserve. Okay, and the initial state value, I'll set this to, I don't know, $500,000. Again, this fictitious example, I'll just put a unit type. You don't really have to. I'll do it anyways. Put a currency. So what you're done, Simio, is this is, or the way we're going to use this variable is we're going to kind of, this represents the $500,000 in initial, reserve balance the bank has to operate for a certain period of time. Okay, so that's what the initial state value tells me is 500,000, and then there's going to be a withdrawal request every 45 minutes. So technically here, okay, I can just set up this every 45 minutes using the interval time, but I'm going to use this timer element just to demonstrate the point here. Okay, so I'm going to go to definitions and go to elements and create two timers. Okay, first timer, I'm going to call this make withdrawal. And then the second timer will be make deposit. So withdrawal occurs every 45 minutes. So I'm going to set my interval to 45 minutes. Okay. And then make deposit occurs every 60 minutes. So I'm going to set the interval to 60 and then change the units to minutes. And go back to my facility view. Now, again, I could have just used the inter-arrival time, but I'm going to do this based on a timer. So this debit source is creating the withdrawal model entity. The arrival model that changes from inter-arrival time to on event. And then my triggering event will be now the timer that I just made. Make withdrawal dot event, right? Okay. So every 45 minutes, according to this definition here, this element, timer element, every 45 minutes, this is triggered, right? And which then triggers the creation of one of these in the store that will travel down to the bank. Okay. We do have to kind of set up a thing here where, okay, so I'm going to trigger this event. Now, let's not make it complicated here. What I'm going to do here is, you know what, once it hits the bank, so before this thing leaves, I'm going to create a variable at the model entity level, call this let's see, real value, and then this will be the transaction amount. Well, you know what, let's call it amount. Okay, so whether it's the withdrawal or the deposit amount, I'm going to store that value inside the model entity state variable. Okay, so in here, I'm going to go to state assignment, and then before exiting, I'm going to add a state variable assignment. So new variable will be auto entity dot amount, the first item that pops up. And then let's set this value to, I don't know, random dot normal, withdrawal, let's say $5,000, standard deviation of $200. Completely making this up. Okay, I say close. So every time this gets generated, it's some random variable, $5,000 a mean, or standard deviation 200. And then for credit here, oh, you know, one thing I'll do is to make it easier, I'll turn this into a negative. Okay, so change the value from, I'll change this to a negative value, okay, because it's a withdrawal. Okay, and then for the credit part, I'll do the same thing here. So I need to first change the entity type to deposit, and then the inter-arrival, or again, the arrival mode now here is not the inter-arrival time, it's on event. I'm going to reference that timer again, make deposit now. That's the other timer that's supposed to run. Go back here to make deposit. It runs every 60 minutes. Okay. And again, at the state assignment before exiting, I'm going to store the amount value here. So I'm going to do auto entity dot amount, and I'll do this as normal. I'm sorry, random dot normal. I don't know. Let's do like $3,000, standard deviation of 100. Okay. Yeah, let's make that a little bit bigger. 300. Okay. 3,000, standard deviation 300. Close. Okay. So then when I run this, it'll kind of look like it's doing something, right? Okay. So this is going off every 45. Let me speed it up a little bit. See if it should. Okay. So it's kind of to keep track. I'll set up a different logic to kind of keep track here. We can turn on the visibility here. Okay. So this withdrawal should come out, get generated every 45 minutes. The deposit amount should be generated every 60 minutes. Let's kind of keep a count then of how many of deposits, how many withdrawals are generated. So I'm going to create two status labels. I'll put one up here, and I'll put another one down here. Okay, and they basically will indicate how many withdrawals and how many deposits have occurred. Okay, so I'm going to set up the expression here. Call it credit dot. Let's see if I can do it directly. Nope. Let's do output buffer. I think you can do output dot number. Let's see, number exited. I have to do output buffer. Let's do number exited. Okay, so that tells me how many deposits occur. And the same thing out here, but referencing the debit source of debit dot output buffer dot number exited. So let's run this just to kind of see what happens going on. So we should see way more. This number go faster than this number, okay? Because the withdrawal happens every 45 minutes, whereas the deposit happens every 60 minutes. So let's run this. If I have to do it a little faster here. Okay, let's see here. So two, okay, it's catching up, right? And the third withdrawal happens, and a little bit later, the third deposit happens probably. Okay, and then the prison have to withdraw. So it's working, right? This is going off every 45 minutes, and this is going off every 3 minutes. So let's do another thing here now. I want to actually update the account balance, the reserve balance amount. So I'll go to the bank here. I'll do a status time in here, and then I'll do, I don't know, on enter, I'll do it after processing maybe. It does, the processing really has no meaning here, but so I'll just do it after processing here. The variable I want to update is I think it's called cash reserve value, the variable I created earlier. And I'm going to do cash reserve plus model entity, because that's whether it's a withdrawal deposit that's coming in, dot amount. Okay, so let me kind of pause here, kind of explain what's happening here. If you look what's going on here, you have a withdrawal or deposit coming in, and once it hits this bank server, the state variable cash reserve, remember this was the initial value of 500,000. That's kind of really the cash you have at the bank. That gets updated. So if it's a withdrawal, it would be a minus value. If it's a deposit, a positive value. Model entity dot amount. Remember, that's the value that we stored when we generate what is model entity. We generated a value for model entity dot amount as random dot normal, that expression, right? Okay, so that'll update the reserve cash reserve value. Okay, so let me put another status label here, and this will represent the actual cash balance here. It should start at 500,000. It should update as the withdrawals and deposit amount is enter. So I'll do cash reserve. Okay, let's test this out. So let's see what started at 500,000. There was a quick change there. Let me slow it down so you kind of see. We start at a speed factor of just 1, so you kind of see the initial we start at 500,000. See right there, it changes with that withdrawal and deposit happening. Okay, let's see. That's it. Withdraw. Okay. The other thing we're going to do is every 3 hours, we have to make sure that there's a reset in the balance to their initial value. Okay. So how do we do that? We're going to again utilize the timer element. So I'm going to definitions here, create another timer. I'm going to call this one reset balance. So this is supposed to go off every 3 hours. Okay. So the time interval, I'll do 3 hours. Okay. Here, I'm going to set a little offset here. So the reason I want to set up an offset is, like I want the first event, I want the timer this timer reset balance to not happen at 3 hours, but like some offset value. Let's say like 30 minutes in or 2.5 hours in or something. Okay, so I'm just gonna create just write a random value, 1.75 hours. Okay, so 1.75 hours into the simulation, this timer will go off for the first time. Okay, So that's when the balance will reset. I want to use this timer then as a trigger to reset the balance to initial value. Okay. So how do I actually do that then? I'm going to go to processes and then create a process. The triggering event here is that timer I just made. Call it reset balance.event. That's the timer. Okay. And once this happens, once this gets fired, this event is triggered. Okay. I'm going to create an assign step, and this is where I'm going to reinitialize that value. Okay. So I think it's called cash reserve. Okay. The new value for cash reserve now is cash reserve dot initial value. Okay, so restoring it back to the initial value. Okay, so let's go back and let's run this again. So it's going. Let's speed it up a little bit here. So the first one's going to start at 1.75 hours, but then every 3 hours after that, you should see this balance gets restored to 500,000 again. Okay. So you should kind of see it at here. It's going to come up soon. So at 1.75, you just saw that, right? I'm going to pause it. At hour 1.75, it's now restored back to 500,000. Okay. And then from this point forward, every 3 hours, this balance will get restored to 500,000 again. Okay. Because there's that timer that we created. Okay. So it's going to change again. Let me speed this up a little bit even more. Okay. So 3 hours after this, I'll pause it right when we hit around 4.75 hours. Slow it down so we can catch it. Oh, right there, you see? After 4.75 hours, we've now come back to 500,000. Okay, so just to review, I've created these 3 different timers. I'm using the first 2 timers, make withdrawal and make deposit, to trigger these 2 sources. Again, really the easier way to do this, for at least for these 2 sources, are just use a different arrival mode here. Okay, I could, rather than using on event, I could just do an inter-arrival time, but I wanted to utilize the timer, so I did it based on event. The first one, this debit source works off the make withdrawal timer, and the credit source work off the make deposit timer. And then I added a third timer called reset balance. Okay, and that's triggered every 3 hours, but the first trigger happens at 1.75. This timer goes off at 1.75 hours, and then every 3 hours after that, it'll repeat. And I create an add-on process that's based on the reset balance timer. And whenever that timer goes off, it's going to reset the cash reserve state variable back to its initial value of 500,000. Okay, so that's how we're utilizing the timers in Simio to kind of dictate the flow of my simulation model here. Okay, so hopefully, again, this is a fictitious example. It might be a silly example, but hopefully this kind of clears up any questions or any doubts you had about this timer element. It could be very useful when you're building your simulation model. Okay, so that's it for this video. Check out some of the other videos if you have any questions on how to build some of these simulation models in Simio. Take care. Bye.